right. Okay, let's give everybody a few moments to join us. My name is Sydney Williams, and we will get started here in a few moments. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we're working now. All right, sweet. So, good evening. My name is Sydney Williams. Let's put this sucker up so we can see it. So, welcome to Desert Live. This is a digital storytelling event hosted by the Joshua Tree National Park Association and myself. My name is Sydney Williams, and tonight I will be your storytelling guide. Before we get started, a couple quick things. So, one thing that we do want to do every time we spend time on land, something that's really important to the Joshua Tree National Park Association and something that's important to us here at Hiking My Feelings, is to acknowledge the land that we're on. So before we begin, we want to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who have stewarded the land we are on for time immemorial. And for Joshua Tree in particular, the tribes around that area were Mojave, Cahuilla, Serrano, and Chemehuevi. And I'm in Julian, California, in the mountains, out in the Cuyamaca Mountains, where behind us is Cleveland National Forest. On the other side of our mountain is Cuyamaca Rancho State Park, and this is the land of the Kumeyaay tribe. So this event is possible thanks to the support from the Desert Institute. And for anybody that's new to the Desert Institute, they are the branch of Joshua Tree National Park Association dedicated to bringing educational, cultural, and artistic programs to the field with Joshua Tree National Park Service and its surrounding areas. So, boom. Now we know who everybody is. My name is Sydney Williams. I'm the founder and author of Hiking My Feelings. And what we're going to do today is the digital version of a workshop that I was planning to host before COVID-19 took over and canceled everything. So thank you so much for joining us. The story I'm going to share tonight is about how hiking helped me heal my mind and body. And before we get started, just a quick poll that I'm going to put up here. Let us know, have you ever been backpacking before? The story I'm going to share tonight is about two backpacking trips that I did across Catalina Island. The first one was in December of 2016, and the second one was in June of 2018. And we'll talk about all the lessons learned along the way. And before we get into the trips themselves and all the lessons that I learned on the trail, a little bit of background information about me. Before I started Hiking My Feelings, I worked in corporate America, mostly in corporate communications and marketing. And I worked with Fortune 500 companies, emerging brands. If you've heard of the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, that was me back in 2009. I was writing tweets as the Wienermobile. So if you need hot dog puns, I got you. And I also worked with some new startups, and it was a very crazy career. Excited to be here now. I didn't always grow up outdoorsy. In fact, I grew up in Kansas. So the version of outdoorsy that I experienced was going to the community pool and riding. So we didn't have any mountains. We didn't have anything like this where I grew up. So this is a pretty new endeavor for me within the last 10, 15 years that I started hiking. So to kind of set things up, the first hike was in December 2016, and the 2 years that came before the first hike in 2016 were two of the hardest years of my life. So I want to get you into my mindset as to where I was, and I'll share some of the stuff that happened in 2014 and 2015 so you can kind of get an idea of where I was at mentally before I went on my first backpacking trip. So at the beginning of 2014, excuse me, my friend Chris, who was a former U.S. intelligence officer for the U.S. Army, he took his own life. And as I'm sure you guys are well aware by now, especially out here by 29 Palms at Joshua Tree National Park, on average, 20 veterans in this country every day take their own life. So that's how 2014 started out for me. Later that year, my uncle Mike, who had previously beaten brain cancer, had the tumors come back and take his life. And that rocked me to my core. He was the brightest shining light, one of the most creative people in our family, and it rocked me. Later that year, at the time I was a competitive skydiver, and I was training for the USPA national competition with my team, and my teammate sustained what we thought would be a season-ending injury. So we decided to not go to nationals that year. And after we made that decision, then one of my best friends, Adam, went to Idaho on a base jumping trip, and he died on a base jump. He didn't come home from that trip. So 2014 was basically the worst year ever. 2015 wasn't much better. My husband lost his job and his dream. It was a lot, because at the end of 2014, my skydiving coach, I found out when I got home from Adam's funeral that my skydiving coach was convicted of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl. And knowing what I know about sexual assault and how it plays out in the media, at the time I was working as his director of PR events and marketing, and it wasn't my job to clean up his mess. If there was any chance that this was going to blow back poorly on the business, then I didn't want to be a part of that cleanup crew. So I left. And then 2015 wasn't much better. My husband lost his job and his dream. So that ended up going back to corporate and took a job with the company that I had been working with before I left to go skydive full time. So fast forward, it's 2016. My husband's like, hey, we should go do something outdoorsy. I had the whole week off between Christmas and New Year's. One of the perks of being in corporate, we had the whole business shut down that week. So it wasn't like I have this vacation time, but I'm still scrolling through my phone, like I was definitely off. The business was closed. So I could get out and I could get away, like into the backcountry. And my husband, Barry, he grew up in New Hampshire. He's hiked all over the White Mountains, Presidential Range. He's done a lot of backpacking around the country. And he asked me if I wanted to go on a backpacking trip, and I had never been before. I had done a handful of day hikes here and there. We had done a couple campouts at Joshua Tree National Park, but we hadn't done any backpacking trips together. So I was like, all right, let's do it. So I found myself walking into an outdoor store, and I was like, hey, here's my backpack. Fill it up with everything I need to go backpacking. And I was just like, I basically rolled off the couch and onto the trail for that first trip. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the trail itself, and then we'll talk about the plan for that trip and what actually happened. Because as you guys know, if you've been backpacking before, then you know that not everything always goes according to plan. So I'm going to pull up a map of the Catalina Trail here for you. And it's a trail that goes all the way across Catalina Island. So I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but I'm moving it. So we're starting in the bottom right corner at the trail where it says Avalon. So this is the first day on the trail. You're following this yellow line. The Catalina Trail is 38.5 miles. It goes from tip to tip across Catalina Island. And your first day is about 11 miles. You're going up and down 5 peaks. And in the middle of nowhere right here, if you can see my cursor, there's this playground in the middle of the backcountry. Like imagine the most remote place you've ever been, and then you see a swing set and a slide, and you're like, what? This is weird. So it turns out to be a pretty pivotal point on the island for us, but you keep cruising, and then you get to Blackjack Campground. That's the first of 3, the first of the campsites that you're going to visit. It's the only one that's not on the beach, and it is the only one that has a little bit of cell reception. So your first day is pretty brutal. And then the next day you're going past the airport in the sky here. If you're looking at the map, it's about halfway through. And there's this incredible restaurant at the airport in the sky called the DC3 Bar and Grill. And they have the best cookies. So if you guys decide that you want to hike the Catalina Trail when this is all said and done, when you go past the airport in the sky between Blackjack and Little Harbor, definitely grab the cookies. They're some of the best I've ever had in my life. So then you're making your way down into Little Harbor, following this line here. Little Harbor is a remote beach campsite. It's the first of 3 beach campsites. And on this side of the island, there's no cell service, no nothing. You're right next to the water, falling asleep to the Pacific Ocean. And we took an extra day off here because I really, really like this place. And so your next day on trail, you're going from Little Harbor over here to Two Harbors. This is where there's this, the last little loop of the island is where it starts here in Two Harbors. And so there's this little line that goes like this. This is going past one of the highest points on the island called Silver Peak. And then you go into Parsons Landing, which is your last of the 3 beach campsites. And then your final day on the Trans-Catalina Trail, you're following this road here all the way back to the Two Harbors. And that's basically your victory lap to celebrate how awesome you are for hiking across an island. So that's the plan. Hopefully that worked out and you could see everything. Let's talk about what actually happened. So, hi, I am brand new at backpacking. I've never been before, as is evidenced by my adorable eyes. They are the size of dinner plates. So this is me at the trail. And you'll notice I look like I know what I'm doing. I've got my backpack full of stuff. I've got the gear on. I got a smile. I'm ready to go. But like I said before, this was my first backpacking trip and I had never really been. So I went in an outdoor store, handed them a backpack and told them to fill it up with what I need. And you'll see that I have the clothes on here. But when I was in the dressing room, I grabbed the sizes off the rack that I normally wear. And normally when I go shopping prior to this trip, I don't say very kind things to myself. Can anybody relate? Have you ever said anything not nice to yourself when looking in the mirror? If you have, let us know in the chat because I'm pretty sure I'm not alone on this one. But I went in with the normal sizes that I have and I took the shirt off the hanger and I put it on my body and I couldn't get it to close. And I was like, okay. And then I put the pants off the hanger, pulled them up, and I couldn't even get them over my legs, let alone get them to snap shut. And I was like, I mean, I know the last couple of years were rough, but a little rougher than I thought. So I went back out to the rack and I grabbed the biggest sizes that they offered, which at the time at this store, they had an extra large shirt and a size 16 in pants. And I'm happy to say that in the last 3, 4, 5 years, the outdoor industry has done a number on offering more sizes. So now more people can get outside. But at the time, it was like, I'm wearing this, or I need to go get something from like a Walmart or a Target or someplace that offers bigger sizes so I can be comfortable in these clothes. But I knew that cotton kills. I had done my research and I wanted to wear performance technical hiking gear. So I like sausage squeezed into these clothes and we're hitting the trail. And it's about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from that picture at Hermit Gulch where I got my first hotspot. Quick vocab lesson. Does everybody know what a hotspot is? If you don't, it's the beginning of a blister. And I was like, okay, my husband, Mr. Outdoorsy, told me everything I need to know about how to tape this up. So I pulled over, I took off my shoes and socks. I got some of that Luco tape, the fancy tape that can like keep the blisters or keep hot spots from turning into blisters. And we kept trucking. And I was like, man, it's a little early to be getting a blister in a 6-day journey, but here we go. We're going to do it. So once we start moving again, this is where we're headed. So this is the interior of Catalina Island. Clearly, these views do not suck. So at some point, you're getting 360-degree views around the island. Like you can see water all around you. And once you start descending into this canyon is where you find that playground in the middle of nowhere. So by the time I got there, I was sweating like I've never sweat before. I basically rolled off the couch and onto the trail. I was 70 pounds heavier than I am today. I did no training whatsoever. I didn't even break in my shoes. Clearly, I'm getting blisters an hour and a half into this joint. And I just got on this swing set in the middle of nowhere in the backcountry. And I was like, okay, my mission is to take as much time here as I possibly can to slow this down. Like, I need to give my legs a break. I need to give my life a break. I'm going to delay as much as I can. So I got on the swing set and I was just trying to move air across my body as efficiently as possible because I was so hot. And I like got the GoPro and I did little videos of like me on the swings. I was just doing everything I can, like pointing out plants and animals as if I know what I'm talking about. I didn't at the time. I'm a naturalist now, but I didn't back then. And I was just like, okay. And so Barry starts tapping his wrist and he's like, listen, if we're going to get to that first campground before sunset, we got to get a move on. And I was like, okay, fine. So we make our way up to Blackjack Campground. And by the time we got there, the sun was like getting ready to set. In bed, dead asleep to the world at 6:30 p.m. because I'm a party animal. I mentioned that you might want to go backpacking with me, and we are hosting some events on the island once we can all safely gather again. but I never promised that I'd be up late. So 6:30 p.m., I'm out. It's over. So the next day, this is where we're headed. This is Little Harbor. So this is your first of 3 remote beach campsites. And I tell you what, this place is stunning. So on Catalina Island, the Tongva were the first people there, and around Little Harbor, there's little dumps of where they used to leave the abalone shells, and this is where they did trade and commerce and stuff like that. On the way into Little Harbor, you pass these big soapstone molds all around the airport and the sky that I mentioned earlier, and it's just this land is stunning, and this campground is no exception. So I ended up spending a whole extra day here. And I'm really glad we did because I couldn't walk. Like I had big dreams of my day off in Little Harbor. I thought that I'd like go get a tan. It's December. I'll go splash around on the ocean. It's going to be lovely. What did I actually do? Nothing. I sat on a picnic table for the entire day, journaling about my questionable life choices. I was just like, do I actually enjoy hiking and backpacking, or am I doing this because my husband likes it? Like the road to get down into this campground was absolutely brutal. At some points, Barry was taking it backwards because his knees were so in pain that by the time we got there, I was just like, I am zonked out. So we had a whole day off. I did nothing. And then I woke up the next morning to this. So I don't know if you guys are familiar. Southern California doesn't get a lot of rain. If you ask anybody on Catalina Island about December 2016, they'll call this the rain event of 2016. So in this picture, it's a little hard to point out, but I do have these nice little Lady Gaga mud boots. It's the latest version from Merrell. They come equipped with a mud-based snowshoe if you're into that kind of thing. And I'm not even hiking yet. Like this is just in the campground. We woke up to torrential downpour and this. So I look adorable, clearly. And the ranger comes up seeing me in my state of, let's call it distress. And he was like, hey, so if you like hiking in a slip and slide, you're going to have a blast today. If you don't, then you can get a ride. And I was like, ooh, I could get a ride? Like, that sounds amazing. And so we ended up not getting a ride. And I'm glad that we didn't because by the time we got into Two Harbors, I was shot. Like, there was no way I could continue. They have this little hut that you go to check in on the dock to go get your campsite. And I'm looking around and I don't see a tent. I don't see a backpack. I see nobody that resembles a hiker. I'm like, where is everybody? This is an island. Pretty sure I didn't take a wrong turn. But if I did, I couldn't have gone too far in the wrong direction. So I'm like, hi, where's the campground? And they're like, oh, it's about a mile uphill. And I was like, huh. Not for me, it's not. Like, there's no way I'm gonna make it up here. And so the theme of this first trip is like extreme beauty and extreme pain. Like, you saw the pictures of Little Harbor, you saw the picture of the interior of the island. Clearly, this island is stunning. This trail is gorgeous. And also, it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So we ended up going to the restaurant that's in the small town of Two Harbors, and we got burgers. We got these delicious drinks called buffalo milk. So buffalo milk, if you drink alcoholic beverages, is the signature drink of the island, and it is named after the bison that live on Catalina Island. Back in the 20s, they filmed a movie on Catalina, brought bison over from the mainland, and then when they were done filming, they never took the bison away. So now there's over 100 bison that freely roam Catalina Island. And it's not made out of buffalo milk, it's just named after them. But if you like alcoholic beverages, you've hiked 26 miles to go get one of these. It's basically like a mudslide mixed with banana with some whipped cream. And then they go the extra mile with the nutmeg on top. And I tell you what, after hiking for the first time for however many days with nothing but food in a bag, that burger that I had was the best thing I've ever had. And I had 1 or 2 or maybe 3 buffalo milks, and they were delicious. So like any good hikers, after we got done, we were at the bar, and then we're like, you know what? I think this is the end of the trip for us. Because when I checked in at the dock, they told me, you know, as far as the rest of the trail goes, it's questionable. We'll make the call in the morning. If you've been watching this for the whole time we've been on, all 19 minutes of this so far, I think it's pretty obvious by now. I don't have a filter for my face. So when they said that it was questionable, I was like, and they're like, okay, yeah, she needs help. So they're like, okay, questionable. It's been raining a lot. The trail is in a questionable condition. If it rains anymore tonight, it won't be safe to hike, so we'll make the call in the morning. And I was like, oh, got it. Okay, cool. You said the trail's in a questionable condition. So is my body. My body is in a questionable condition. So lights out, it's over. We didn't go get that campsite. We ended up getting a tent cabin in town, so we didn't have to walk uphill anymore. And then I spent the next 2 days just sitting in that cabin and casually going out to eat and sitting by the water. And that was the end of the first trip. And I had some unfinished business with this island now because I'm a lady who likes to do what she says and likes to finish what she starts. And I didn't get to finish this trail. So I go home. We get back to San Diego. And a few months later, I went to Paris. So I go to Paris with my best friend and I'm on the metro and I realize this feels like I'm on the trail, which makes literally no sense because I'm not. I am on a crowded subway. So what's the key theme here? Well, on the metro in Paris, I don't speak the language. Like I was the only person on the train speaking English or consuming English spoken media, and there's nobody around me that is telling me that I'm not awesome or I'm not pretty or I'm not all the things that internally we should all know that we are, but society beats out of us. So there's none of this internal message. You're too fat. You need to buy this to feel happy. You need to do this to your hair to be worthy of like love and society and all this stuff. There was none of that. Instead, it felt like I was on the trail where I don't have a data plan. So I'm not like scrolling through my phone. I didn't do that on the trail either. I'm just sitting here left alone with my positive thoughts because on that first trip, I learned two important lessons. The first one was I love my body. Even though I didn't recognize it in that dressing room, that body took me all the way, almost all the way across an island. That's pretty cool. And I remembered that I can do hard things like hike for multiple days in a row. So on this metro, I'm like just cruising with these positive thoughts in my head because there's nothing to distract me from that and nothing to infiltrate my mind with negativity. So I'm just standing there feeling like a goddess in Paris for 10 days, which I did not expect. I had a very narrow expectation of what I thought Paris would be like. I thought everybody would be this big, walking around town in luxurious clothing, smoking cigarettes, drinking espresso or fine wine, like the entire city was a runway. And there was some of that, but overwhelmingly, it was one of the most beautiful, diverse places I had ever visited. And I was like, oh my God, like left alone with my positive thoughts, I am a dangerous human being. And it was brilliant. I felt so good. For 10 days, I walked around that city. So I get back from Paris, and my husband was like, hey, we should go paddleboarding. And I was like, would Sydney from Paris like to go paddleboarding? Like Paris Sydney is my new measure because she felt so free and lovely and like uninhibited and absolutely beautiful and brilliant and worthy of everything good coming her way. So Paris Sydney is my new measure. I was like, yeah, Paris Sydney would like paddle. We had never been paddleboarding before. I thought we were going to go like rent them and try it out. No, we bought them straight out. My arms, I was like, oh my God, those tattoos are gorgeous. Like, body was still the biggest different. And I was wearing the swimsuit, and like, my stomach is the part of my body that I am so self-conscious about. But in that moment in that dressing room, I was like, girl, like, the human race is perpetuated by this section of a woman's body. Like, if you wanted to have kids, you could further humanity, yeah, and not be going to the beach all the time. So this is my first time on the water, and I was just like, oh my God, I get it now. This makes so much sense. Like, the water is my happy place. I've been robbing myself of this experience. What a different perspective. So then I'm like, okay, that's true. Like, the water is my happy place. But I also had this deeply held belief that if I had the audacity to go out in public in a swimsuit and not be covered up, that people would literally drop dead at the side of my body. So I'm in the San Diego Bay. Nobody's dying. There's no search and rescue happening. Nobody's drowning. Life is good. So what? Like, what other lies have I been telling myself? If it's possible that one of the things that I thought was as true as my skin is white, my name is Sydney, I'm sitting on a chair in Southern California right now, all those things are true. It was also that true that I thought that if I went out in public in a swimsuit that people would die. So when that wasn't happening, I was like, okay, if that's not true, what other lies have I been feeding myself? And that was a big question for me. So one of the things that we did all summer was paddleboarding. I loved it. It was amazing. Every body of water we could get on, I got on. And we went out for a really long paddleboarding session. And this was in September 2017. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to San Diego, but generally speaking, it's like 72 and sunny. This day, it was like Florida hot. The air was so thick, it was hard to breathe. It was just a mess. And I wasn't prepared. We were out there for a long time. I didn't have enough water. And for the like 2 or 3 weeks after that, I just didn't feel right. It felt like there was something going on in my stomach, and I was just like dehydrated. I thought maybe I had a heat stroke or something, but I woke up on September 18th, 2017, and it felt like somebody took a corset, stuck it in through my belly button, and then wrapped it around my intestines and was cinching it down. And I was like, this is the worst pain I've ever been in. We got to get to the hospital. So we ended up doing 3 days worth of tests to rule out any parasites or viruses. And then I got the call when I was driving to the airport, and I pick up the phone. We're on the way to pick up a friend. Like, I am literally pulling into the arrival section at the San Diego airport, and my phone rings and it's the doctor's office. And they told me that I have type 2 diabetes. And my first thought was like, okay, well, let's not wreck the car I was driving. And then the second thought I had was like, well, I guess I can't eat bread anymore. Like, that was my first question, was like, I don't know anything about what's happening inside my body currently. I don't know if I'm going to have to be on medications for the rest of my life. Like, how do I deal with this disease? So we picked up our friend, we went to our favorite sandwich shop, and I had what I thought would be my last ceremonious sandwich. So I'm like holding up this sandwich at the Pacific Beach Pier, and I'm like, hey, bread, it's Sydney. It's been real, but I think we got to break up. It's not you, it's me. But I've got type 2 diabetes, and I'm pretty sure like I can't eat bread anymore. So sayonara carbs, it's been fun. And then I like ate my sandwich and I sobbed. And then when I went to the grocery store or restaurants or anything that had anything to do with food for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I was just a mess. Because I didn't know. Like, I didn't know if I could eat these things that I normally ate. I didn't know what was happening inside my body. But fortunately, I started going to diabetes education classes at the hospital, and I learned a couple things. First of all, 49% of US adults are living with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. 49%. That is insane. Like, this is such an epidemic, and it is not getting enough attention, I don't think. But if that's true, then there should be a lot of resources to help me manage this disease, and there were. One of the other facts that I learned is that there's 4 factors that affect your blood sugar: how you move your body, the food you eat, the medications you take, and your stress. So I took to the first 3 right away. I'm a people pleaser. I love gold stars. So I channeled all of that energy into being the best diabetes patient my doctor's ever seen. So I stopped eating like a 12-year-old boy, tossed out the frozen pizzas, added in some more vegetables, crushing it. And I started walking around the neighborhood 30 to 45 minutes, and I started taking my medications as prescribed. So when you start doing that after doing nothing, you're going to see results. And I was seeing physical results. I was losing weight, and that was part of the goal for my diabetes management plan, was to lose the weight so I could better manage the disease. Except my blood sugar levels were still elevated. So I had to take a good hard look at my stress. Where was that coming from? My job. And I knew it, but I didn't want to go there because I was the breadwinner for our family, and I really liked my job, even though it was driving my health into the ground. So at the time that I got diagnosed, I was leading email marketing for NBC Universal, and I got diagnosed the week before fall premieres. So if you know anything about the entertainment industry, if you have a favorite show, we really like to tell you when your favorite show is starting. And that was my job for every show on the network. It was wild. So now that I'm looking at my stress, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I work from home. Like, maybe I can start putting some boundaries around my time. Like, I don't have to wake up first thing and go straight to my computer. I could like go for a jog or a paddleboarding session or eat something. I don't have to go straight to work. And I was doing that, and that did help a little bit. But ultimately, when you're working in client services, you're kind of on their time. So if they needed me to go do something, I needed to go do it. So then I was like, okay, well, maybe I could like switch accounts because NBC takes up a lot of my time. This is an amazing agency that I work at. We have tons of clients. Maybe I could transition onto something that's a little bit less time intensive that would give me more time to prioritize my health. That didn't work either. So on the side, I had been helping my friend with her marketing and branding for her startup. And it was an all natural skincare company rooted in women's empowerment and social justice. And she offered me the opportunity to join the team full time as her chief marketing officer. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to take it. Like, I know that leaving corporate America to go join a startup is not going to be a stress reducer in and of itself. But one of the things that I learned when I was diagnosed with diabetes and I'm looking over my resume trying to decide how to manage my stress was that everything that I thought was a bragging point on my resume was actually teaching people how to be sick and how to be numb. And I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to use these skills for good and make the world a better place. Like when I was working with Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, like I wanted you to eat lots and lots of hot dogs and processed meats. Like that's not good for you. And when I was working in the wine industry, I wanted you to responsibly drink lots of wine because that makes my clients lots of money. I didn't think about like my intention was good. My intention was like make the people happy, make my clients happy, but the impact was like I could be contributing to people being sick or alcoholics or, you know, whatever. So with this shift from corporate to my friend's startup, I knew that that dynamic wasn't going to be their stress reducer. But if I can wake up and feel good about what I'm doing in the morning and believing that I'm making the world a better place, then maybe the stress will be worth it. So that was the energy I took into that job. And that was the cutest intention I've ever had, ever. I made it about 95 days on that job because as soon as I started, it was abundantly clear that this was not what I thought I signed up for. The business was in a very different position than I thought it was in financially. We got a humongous order, which was like one of the biggest blessings ever, but also we weren't ready for it. So we took it and we didn't really have room to produce the stuff. We couldn't afford the supplies. So I ended up extending my personal credit to fund the business, which was terrifying. And as a result of that, my panic attacks started happening every day, sometimes twice a day. And I was just like, I can't keep living like this. So after 95 days at the startup, I quit. I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have any savings to speak of. I didn't have another job lined up. I was just like, I don't know what's next, but it's not this. And that was a really pivotal moment for me. And before I had decided to leave, I had booked another trip on the Catalina Trail. My thought was, I'll go after we get this big order out and either I'll come back and I'll be refreshed and I'll feel awesome and I'll stop being like so snippy with my business partner. I'll stop being so anxious. Maybe I'll be able to get some rest, or I'm not even going to make it that long and I'm going to quit. Either way, I know that I want to go hike this island again for my 33rd birthday. So it turns out I went the second route and I quit before we even got to that. So now I have 2 weeks off and nothing to do. There is nothing in my way. I don't have another job to start. I don't have anything to set up with this stuff. So all I have to do is just focus on myself. And that was a lot for me. I started hiking more. I was on a training hike, and it was on this training hike where it was just like the biggest lightning bolt of inspiration I've ever felt. Was I'm standing at the top of Stonewall Peak. It's a mountain here in San Diego. And I realized, like, as I got to the top, I was like, I'm feeling pretty chill. And I don't know why. Like, why do I feel okay when everything is melting down around me? Like, I don't have a job. I don't know how we're going to make money. I don't know what comes next. Why am I not stressed out? And I realized in that moment that thanks to diabetes, I had started hiking my feelings instead of eating and drinking them, because a pint of Ben and Jerry's or a bottle of wine to myself, that was my favorite way to cope. And those were my go-to coping mechanisms. So I shifted from eating and drinking my feelings to hiking my feelings. And that made sense. I was like, oh, okay, that's why I feel so great. But I wanted to know, like, why was I eating and drinking my feelings to begin with? Because as much as we make that easy to do in this country, as much as it's socially acceptable to eat and drink your feelings, why was I doing it? What was the thing? Like, what's the root of this behavior that now I fixed? So as I'm preparing for the second trip across Catalina Island, I'm thinking to myself, I was like, okay, well, I've already done this at the worst shape I've ever been in, with no training, no prep whatsoever. What would be possible if the hike itself wasn't the hard part this time? Because I already know I can do it with no training. And this time I've been training, I've lost 60 pounds thanks to my diabetes management plan. Like, I have been working hard. I think that there could be more to this than just a physical experience. Like, yes, it's going to be a physical effort to backpack across an island. I'm not saying that's easy, but what if that wasn't the hardest part? So that was the energy I was taking into the second hike. And to go into this next one, I was just really excited. This was my 33rd birthday. We're going for this trip. There's nothing in my way. All I got to do is put one foot in front of the other and hike for 6 days. And it was awesome. So we go and we stay with our friends in Long Beach. We wake up. We missed we missed the first lift. I woke up to the Lyft driver calling me saying he was ready to take us to the ferry. And then we get in the next lift and we're driving, and the cab driver's like, "Hey, like, what's up with the backpacks?" He's taking us to the ferry landing to go to Catalina. And I was like, we're gonna go hike across the island. And he was like, "Man, that is so cool. Like, I've always wanted to do something like that, but if I did, I'd have to go with my buddies. How cool is it that you guys get to share this experience together? You're so lucky." And I just looked at Barry. I was like, "Babe, we're so lucky." Like, aw, and it's true. Like, how cool is it that we get to share this? So then we get to the ferry building. We get in line. There's this guy behind us. He's like, "Hey, the trail's changed a little bit. You're gonna love it. More shade structures. Everything's great. It's gonna be awesome." And so we go and we get on the island and we go to Hermit Gulch. We get all of our stuff together. We start making our way up towards the interior of the island where we saw the first picture from the first trip. And I'm looking around and I'm like, yeah, this is definitely where I got the blister the first time, but now I'm a professional backpacker. Like, I've got my trail running shoes on and I don't need to break those in. They're ready to go. I adjusted my backpack so I'm not schlepping like 40 pounds across the island this time. And now I've got this app that tracks my distance because I'm a professional backpacker now. So I'm curious. I'm looking around. I was like, yeah, this is where it happened the first time. This is where I like almost lost it with that first blister. I thought it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours into it. I pull out my app and we were a quarter mile into a 38.5 mile journey when I got a blister the first time. A quarter mile. What? So I'm like shouting. I'm like, "Hey, Barry, guess what? We're a quarter mile in and I don't have any blisters." And he's like, "I would hope not. Like, we just got started." I was like, "Yeah, but like, this is where it happened last time." He's like, "All right, cool." I was like, "Sweet. Well, I'll just party by myself back here. Like, yay me, no blisters." And we kept hiking. And I was just like, man, come on. So as we're hiking, I am a little bit of a mess. I cry a lot. And I found myself thinking about all of my friends that had passed away. I mentioned at the beginning in 2014 that there were 3 people that I lost, but over the course of the 4 years that I was skydiving, 23 of my friends died. And on this trail, the second time was the first time that I had to fully process that and grieve that. So by the time I get to this playground in the middle of nowhere, I go and I sit on this bench and I'm thinking to myself, like, why do I feel so amazing? Like, before I sat down on this bench, I had checked my blood sugar. Everything was perfect. And I was like, awesome. Okay. So then I go and I take my shirt off. I run over to the water fountain. I fill up my water bladder. And I'm not freaking out. Like, I'm standing here in my trail runners, trekking tights, and a sports bra, no shirt. And I'm just like, why am I not freaking out? There's a whole group of people behind me. The last time we were here, it was just me and Barry. And now there's a whole group of people, and I'm not running to go hide my body. Why? Like, yeah, I lost weight, but I don't think that's it. So as I'm sitting on this bench, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, this is the first time I had to grieve my friends. That makes sense. And I didn't understand what the connection was, but I felt like lighter. As I was saying, like, weight had just been lifted off my shoulders. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like, I grieve and cry about my dead friends and now I don't wear shirts anymore. Like, what's happening here? I don't really understand the connection. So this time Barry didn't have to like usher me around. I was like, okay, let's go. I'm ready to go to Blackjack. So we got to that first campground 2 hours faster than we did the first time we did this hike. And I was like, clearly this is a very different journey. Like, we are shaving massive time off this hike. So we go to bed that night. We wake up the next morning and there's a bison in our campground. So Barry's like, and I was like, what? And I was like, oh God. And there's a buffalo in the campground. So like I said, they just roam the island. If you're lucky, they'll come hike with you. Word of the wise, if their tail is up, do not do anything. Like, they are upset. So stay away. Don't try to pet them. Don't try to get a selfie with them. Like, they're fluffy, but they are massive animals and they're like basically the size of dinosaurs. So just steer clear, give them wide space. So we wake up on that second day. We're going past the airport in the sky. I grab a cookie. I'm stoked about it. We start making our way to Little Harbor, and the group in front of us, like, we start making our way to Sheep Shoot Road, the one that would like felt like it was awful and that Barry had to take backwards because his knees were hurting so bad. We start making our way down that road, and the group in front of or behind us was like, hey, if you're doing the TCT, like the whole thing, you don't go that way. It's over here. And so they had changed the trail. And so instead of Sheep Shoot Road, which was this brutal downhill, rutted out, eroded old access road, now is this. So this is the Big Springs Ridge Trail, and I'm standing on this sucker, Emily Andrews, in the Sound of Music. Like, I am twirling in circles. I'm having the best day of my life because this is just like this beautiful single track cut into the side of the mountain, and it's like the easiest, most beautiful hike. And as you start making your way down, like, you can see a little bit of the marine layer there. As we start making our way down the hill into Little Harbor Campground, that marine layer burns off, and then you're just looking at that cove the whole time that you're walking in. And it was just stunning. So we get there and we go and now we have another day off, and not because we needed it because I was dying like I was on the first trip, but because we actually just really like spending time in Little Harbor. So we go and we spend our time there, and we have this whole day off, and we were like doing little photo shoots. We got to explore. Turns out there's this whole big rock formation called the Whale's Tail, which looks like a whale's tail from above. And you could like climb all over it. And there's a whole nother harbor on the other side called Shark Harbor. Didn't know that. The last time we were there, I just sat on the picnic table and cried about my life choices. This time I'm like Captain Adventure on my day off. So we go to bed that night after our day off. And as we do, when we turn off, like the lights go down, the sun goes down, stars come out, we put on our headlamps, and all we could see is animal eyes everywhere. So if you've ever seen Pee-wee's Big Adventure, it's a little bit like that scene in the movie where he's like scanning and it's just all animal eyes. And so we had bison, we saw some deer. There's a Catalina Island fox. It's like this itty bitty fox that you can only find on Catalina Island, nowhere else in the world. And then there were squirrels and crows and all kinds of birds. And it was just like a petting zoo in Little Harbor that second night. So we wake up the next morning, and I find myself standing at the trash can with a tube of deodorant in my hand. And do you need deodorant on a backpacking trip? No, you don't. But I knew that because I'm a professional, like I said. So on trip number 2, I knew that I didn't need a full stick of deodorant. So I saved like the little nub at the end of my last tube and brought it with me for this trip so I could have something. I wanted to smell fresh. It's my birthday trip. I'm traveling with my husband. Maybe something fun will happen. I don't know. So I'm standing at the trash can, and I have a tube of deodorant in my hand and this hand on the lid. And I know that this is coming up. So this is our neck. I'm the little miniature person about halfway up this mountain. So I'm standing here and I'm like, okay, I know I have this big climb coming. Pack weight wise, this isn't heavy. It's not. But emotionally, I might as well be carrying an anvil. This is the heaviest deodorant I've ever held in my hand ever. So I'm having this existential crisis at the trash can. I'm like, deodorant, trash can, deodorant. Do I need this? Do I want to bring it? I don't know. So I go, and oh my gosh, Barry, like cool as a cucumber, right on time, comes cruising by, and he's like, hey, this is deodorant, embrace your stank. And I was like, okay. So I like lift the lid, I throw the deodorant away, and I was like, embrace my stank. Then I got a whiff of myself, and I smelled so gross. Like, I'd been backpacking for 5 days at that point. It's nasty. It's not working out for me. But in the spirit of embracing my stink, everybody has a scent, right? Like, I have a scent, you have a scent. It's one of those things that makes us us. So what are the other things about my body that I can't change or fix, that I've been trying to change or fix for forever, that make me me? Like, what are these things that people have said are bad or wrong or gross, or that otherwise need to be different in order to fit into a very narrow standard of beauty in this country? So I start thinking to myself, and I start walking up this hill. And if you guys know who Flava Flav is, I turned into my own Flava Flav. I was going to hype myself up this mountain like I've never done before. So I'm thinking about all these things that make me me. And the first thing that I thought about was my thumbs. So my thumbs look like toes. And when I was little, my sister used to say, you know, boys don't like girls with toe thumbs. And that scarred me for life. Like, I walked around like this with my thumbs tucked in my fists, just praying that nobody would see my thumbs that look like toes. And if they didn't, then maybe I could get a boyfriend. This was like third grade. Clearly, my priorities were already well established. But as I'm walking up this hill, I'm like, you know what? Your thumbs are sweet. And this is my Flavor Flav voice inside my head. He's like, hey girl, your thumbs are dope. They're attached the right way. Like they're small but mighty, just like you. But when you give a thumbs up, like people know that you're giving a thumbs up. It's not like this is some sad endeavor and that you're booing them. Like it's a thumbs up. You're fine. Like your thumbs are great. And I was like, okay, cool. And then the other thing that I was thinking about was my hair. So I'm wearing it natural now, but prior to this trip, and admittedly, for this trip, I was a slave to a straightener. I straighten my hair all the time. Why? Because I grew up in Kansas and I watched shows like The Hills and The OC, where all the popular girls who had everything, boyfriends, money, cool cars, college scholarships, internships at cool companies, they all had long, flowing, straight blonde hair. So in my mind, growing up in Kansas, if I wanted to be like the SoCal girls, if I had long, flowing, blonde, straight hair, then I'd be great and like killing life. So one of the things that happened right after I got out of college, I started working at a global PR agency in their Chicago office. And if you guys have seen The Devil Wears Prada, it was kind of like that. Not in that everybody that I worked with was a bunch of jerks, because most of the people were really nice, but it was like high fashion a lot of the time. And it was the Chicago headquarters. So we always had clients in the building. So one day I decided to bring out my straightener. And I walked into work with my hair like this, and I was really towing the line on business casual. And I walked past my mentor's office and she looked at me and she like pulled me inside and she just looked me up and down like this. And then she started looking at my hair and she wouldn't stop. And she was like, we have clients in the building. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, if I want to stay gainfully employed, if I want to continue making my college, my student loan payments, and if I want to be able to pay rent, I need to straighten my hair because that's the only thing I can think of that's different right now. And apparently this hairdo is not acceptable. So all the way up this mountain, I was like, listen, your hair is sick. People would pay good money to get those waves. People buy devices, products, get treatments. They do all kinds of things to get that kind of texture. And PS, if you're working somewhere where they think your natural hair isn't cool, you don't need to be working there anyway. Go find another job. So I'm pumping myself up. I get to the top. I'm feeling amazing. And so I get up there and now, well, first of all, I don't wear shirts anymore. This is a new thing for me. It started 2 days ago on this trail. So I take off my shirt and I'm standing there and I'm just like standing in my power for the first time. I don't know if you guys have ever felt that before, but it's pretty miraculous. And I just stood there and I was taking in these views and I was reminded of this TED talk I watched about power posing. And I didn't stand in this position because I was told to power pose if I needed to feel powerful, but I understood what that speaker meant when she was talking about it ad nauseum. I was like, oh, I get it. Like I do feel powerful in this position. And also I feel powerful because I just reclaimed some of the things that people have been saying are bad or wrong or gross that I've been trying to fix, that I'm just done trying to fix. Like, this is who I am. This is my body. This is what my hair looks like. And if you don't like it, that's fine. So we kept making our way down. We actually got into Two Harbors this time. This was our campground. We actually made it there. So the little tent is where we were set up. And then it's kind of hard to see, but there's a faint line behind the tent. That's the fire access road on the return from Parsons Landing. So after we set up camp, we went down to the bar, we grabbed our burgers, grabbed a couple Buffalo Milks, and I was just thinking like, you know what? Everything from here on out is new territory, right? Like I didn't get to finish this trail the first time. I haven't hiked any more miles than this in this many days. I've never done this many days in a row. I've never seen the rest of the trail. Like, yeah, I've done the research, I've read the map, but I don't know what's coming. So I was just thinking, I was like, hey, universe, like if you know anybody who's like seeing the other part of the trail, that'd be cool. So we start making our way up to the campground and there's a couple that's following behind us and they're doing the trail backwards. So they are coming from where we are headed tomorrow. So I had read the maps and I had read some reviews of the route to get out to Parsons Landing and they confirmed my understanding. The route to get there, there's two ways you can go and the loop goes like this. So if you're going to go in order, which I am because I'm a perfectionist and I want to do things in order to the book, this side goes past one of the highest points on the island, like I mentioned at the beginning, and what goes up must come down. On the way down from there, There's not any switchbacks really. It's just pretty much straight down, and it's that loose gravelly stuff. So you got to watch your step, make sure you have your poles ready, hike your own hike kind of thing. I was like, okay. And then they confirmed that that thin line behind that picture of the tent, that's the fire access road. It's basically flat, your victory lap back to Two Harbors to celebrate your completion of the trail. So I am ready to go. We go to sleep. We wake up the next morning. Barry's like, which way you want to go? Hard or easy? And I was like, were you on the first hike? I can do hard things. Let's go the hard way. So we did. And they were not kidding. There's no switchbacks. It's one of the hardest climbs I had done. It was definitely the hardest hike I had done up until that point in my life. And also, it was just brutal. Like, I got to the top and I'm going, like, as I'm walking, I hear this voice in my head and it says, when life gets hard, you run. And I didn't like that. I don't believe that to be true. I don't think that that's something that I do. So building on the exercise that I had done the day prior with the Flava Flav pumping myself up thing, I was like, okay, um, I'm going to pump myself back up here. So when life gets hard, I run. Okay, well, I'm going to just release that and see what happens. Because I had heard in a personal growth course back in the day that you can just release thoughts, like as if you were just letting go of a balloon and just watch it float away. Your negative thoughts will leave you. And I was like, I don't think it's that easy, but I got nothing to lose. All I got to do today is walk. So I'm going to give it a shot. And so I did that. I was like, okay, when life gets hard, I run. I'm going to let that go. And I did, and it was kind of peaceful for a little bit. I was like, that's really nice. It sounded like my voice when I said it, like when I heard it. It sounded like me saying that to myself. So I let it go. I hiked for a little bit in total silence, which was lovely. And then the voice comes back, except this time it sounds like the person who actually said it, which was my business partner. When I told her that I couldn't fund the operation anymore and that I needed to leave because my health was at risk, like my panic attacks were almost daily, sometimes twice a day. My blood sugar levels are through the roof, reading numbers that I haven't seen since I was first diagnosed. She was like, that makes sense. When life gets hard, you run. And I was like, oh, well, now I know where it came from. I don't believe that to be true. So now I'm going to pump myself back up. So I told myself, I was like, okay, well, what are some of the hard things I've done? Well, I've jumped out of an airplane almost 700 times for fun. That's hard. I've moved around this country for love and work multiple times. That's hard. And I've hiked 26 miles across this island so far, almost 30. Like, I think it's safe to say when life gets hard, I don't run. In fact, I do hard stuff for breakfast. So that's cool. What else? So as I made my way up this mountain and we're going to one of the highest points on the island, no switchbacks, just straight up slog of a hike. I have all these other things come up and it's this negative soundtrack in my head. And it's stuff like, you're too fat. You'll always be a base. You'll never be a flyer in a cheerleading stunt. It was things like when my boss told me that I should bring my first date personality to a client meeting because my full personality might scare away the clients and we could lose the business. It was a mentor at work saying that if I wanted to make friends here, I should probably tone down my enthusiasm. If it's not her idea, she'll shut it down. Things like that. These things that we internalize, either we hear it from TV or movies, or we tell it to ourselves, or our parents say something when we're young and we just believe these things to be true. And I worked through this whole list all the way up the mountain. And by the time I got to the top, I felt on fire. Like I felt so good. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, when was the last time I felt this good? When was the last time I felt this capable and positive and comfortable in my skin and like supported by the people around me? Like, I know this feeling. I felt it before, but this feels different. And so I just got my arms up like I do in this picture. And I'm just like, I feel so good. And so as I start making my way down the mountain, I was thinking to myself, like, I'm seeking, I'm just waiting. Like, I know this feeling. Like, when was the last time I felt these things? And so at this point, Barry's a good distance ahead of me. He's a little bit of a billy goat. He hikes pretty fast. So I'm going down there, really trying not to lose my step because I'm going like side step down this thing because it's that steep and it's so loose. And so my foot slips and I catch myself. I was like, I am not rolling down this mountain. It's not going to happen today. And it hit me. The last time that I felt this confident in my own skin, this capable, this sure of the direction my life was going was right before I was raped, now 14 years ago. It was 12 years at the time. And when I had that realization, I didn't feel scared or sad. I felt free because for the first time in my life since the assault, I could understand all the chaos that had ensued in my mind and body. If my life was a cartoon at this point, like it sounds like a slot machine in my head. It's like ding, 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 ding. Like all these dots are connecting. all the context for my life is coming into focus. And I'm thinking to myself, I was like, this is this is it. Like this is the piece that has been missing from this puzzle. Like I've been doing some personal growth stuff for a long time. I've been trying to get my health under control. I've been trying to like manage my mental health, and now I have this answer. Now I know the root of everything. When I asked myself on the top of that training hike, why was I eating and drinking my feelings to begin with? Here's my answer. Because after I got assaulted, I didn't get help. I didn't tell anybody. The first person I told was my husband, and I had been with him for 7 years, married for 5 by the time I felt comfortable enough to tell him. So I'm thinking to myself, I was like, this is everything. This is huge. Like, I didn't go to the police. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my friend whose house it happened at. I just went home, showered, and was like, this doesn't happen to girls like us. I'm taking this to the grave. So now that I've got this big realization, I'm thinking to myself, I was like, okay, well, when I get down to this last campground, it's a remote beach campsite. When I get down there, I want to walk into the ocean butt naked. Because for the first time in my life, I have context for why I've had so many issues with my body, with my confidence, with my self love, with everything. And I want picture proof that I have given myself this gift to A, to walk into the ocean naked because it sounds like a fun thing to do, but B, like I prioritize my health. I made some big sacrifices to get here. And I want photographic evidence that I gave myself this gift. And when things are different, when I'm old and gray and everything's in like different places and I'm saggy, like I don't want to have a picture of my body looking like happy and healthy on this island. So I go and I shout down to Barry. I'm like, hey, Barry, when we get down to Parsons Landing, I want to walk into the ocean butt naked. Will you be my cameraman? And he was like, hell yeah, I'll be your cameraman. So we get down to the water or we get down to the campsite, and I take off all my clothes. I take off everything. Like there's nothing in my hair, take off my hair bands, take off everything. The only things that are not mine on my body are my contact lenses. And so I go and I walk into the water, and I go out, and it's really cold. I was not expecting this. I was fully expecting, this is June 2018. I'm expecting like Caribbean waters off this beach, not happening. So I was like, okay, this is freezing. So I walk out and like try to get acclimated to the water. I let the waves like hit me a little bit. And then I walk out far enough to where the water's covering my butt. And I was like, okay, I feel like this is far enough. On the off chance that I'm ever going to show these pictures to people, this feels safe. Like this obscene. This is just my body in the water. So I go out there and I throw my arms up and I'm just like, hey, thank you. I don't know what's going on out here, but God, universe, unicorns, whoever's listening, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for all of this knowledge. Like if there's anything else that's holding me back from being the best version of myself that I've ever been, let me know what it is. Please and thank you. I'm ready to work through it. So I lower my hands, I plug my nose, and I dip down, except I didn't walk out far enough into the ocean. So my butt hits the ocean floor before my hair goes under. All I want is the Ariel the mermaid shot. I hope you know what I'm talking about. She like comes down onto the water, up onto that rock, and she's like, I'm a mermaid and I'm Ariel. Like that was the shot I wanted. So I'm down, except my head's not under. So like now I'm like committed to getting the shot. So I start doing this like limbo maneuver to get under the water and like get my hair and my head completely submerged. And then I step back up and I pop back up. I wop the water out of my eyes and I slick my hair back, get it out of my face. And it's like instant clarity. Like if this were a movie scene, it's like every cliche movie scene you've ever seen where it's like everything's a little bit out of focus and then it's fine tuned. And like the colors are brighter. There's birds and angels singing, maybe a harp playing in the background, possibly a double rainbow. I can't confirm or deny, but it felt like everything just made sense, complete and total clarity. And I realized that over the course of this island, like, yes, I had been hiking my feelings. That was abundantly clear. But in this moment, in this water, I was reclaiming my body. The people who told me that it wasn't good enough and that I needed to fix it in order to feel beautiful and worthy in this society, and from the man who assaulted it. And that felt incredible. And I was just like, oh man, I am home and it feels good. And I was just like, okay, there's more to this than I thought. Like this is everything that I thought it could be. And so we get done with the trail. We made it. Everything was insanely awesome. And like, I just felt so accomplished. And I realized that there's a handful of takeaways from this situation. So if I could leave you with three things today, it would be this. The first thing is get help treat the wound, because trauma is not is not just a scratch, it's an open wound. And if we don't treat it, it will fester. Like if we treat mental trauma and emotional trauma with the same tenacity that we do physical trauma, I firmly believe we could have a completely different experience as human beings on this planet. Because what's in my backpack is not just the sexual assault. There are tons of different kinds of trauma. I talk about this backpack that I've got on, and I call it my trauma pack, and it's heavy and it's been weighing me down. And what I realized was that each step along the way across this island, I was unpacking that backpack. So the trauma in my backpack was like all of my dead friends, right? Like this is one of those things. It's like 10 essentials. I will never leave home without the memories of my friends who have passed away. But I worked through all the hard stuff. I left all that on the trail. I cried, I grieved, I dry heaved, I threw up a little bit because I was crying so hard. I left all that out there. And then what I put back in the backpack was like the happy memories. How can I keep their legacy alive? How can I make sure that these people are never forgotten? And then I'm digging through this backpack. So like if we think about the different times across the island where I felt lighter, like the first one was my friends that had passed away. And then sitting on that bench, I felt lighter. And then I'm thinking about my thumbs and my hair and the racing my stink as I'm like chucking stuff out of the backpack. And I get to the top of that mountain standing like Superwoman. And I'm like feeling lighter in my shoes again. And then after that list of all the things that I had ever internalized that was really hard to work through, that's like the emergency unpack at TSA at the airport, right? Where they're like, something's in your bag and it's not okay. And so you just start chucking stuff everywhere and you're like, that's not mine. That's not mine. Oh my God. I realized like there's a lot of different kinds of trauma, and a lot of the stuff that I was carrying in my backpack wasn't mine. Like I was just carrying it because I'm a nice lady and I picked it up from somebody else and put it in my own pack. So it was like the expectations of my family, how my dad responds to stuff, or the expectations of society, or all these different messages that I internalized as my truth. As I let those go, then my backpack gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And the really heavy thing that was at the bottom of my backpack was the sexual assault. So that's not the only kind of trauma. Trauma looks like divorce. It looks like surviving gun violence. It looks like surviving a global pandemic like COVID-19 and having your entire plans uprooted and ripped out from underneath you. That's traumatic. Divorce, domestic violence, car accidents, taking care of people who are older than you, or losing a child. Like there are so many things that are traumatic. And once we start to address those with the same tenacity and urgency as we do physical trauma, everything could change. Like if I was sitting here with you next to me and I was like, had my arm like broken, bone sticking out of skin, or like if I was bleeding out, right? You'd be like, hey, let's go to the hospital. But we don't do that for emotional trauma. So when we do, I think we're going to have a very different experience. Number two, whenever you can, get outside. Because for me, the thing that I found was when I disconnect from my distractions, I'm able to reconnect with myself. So I get the screen out of my face. I'm not listening to music. I turn off the podcast. I'm not scrolling through social media. The common theme is when we're outside and we're doing an activity that requires all of our attention, all of our senses are like ignited, all of our senses are engaged, and we're paying attention to the sounds of the birds. What does the air smell like? What does the trail sound like when it crunches underneath my feet? Like there are so many different things that we pay attention to when we aren't like this, right? So whenever you can, get outside. And I'm not saying you have to go hike from Canada to Mexico on the Pacific Crest Trail, or go do the Appalachian Trail, or any of these long scenic hikes. Like I started by walking 30 to 45 minutes around my neighborhood every day. And when that got to be too easy, I graduated to local trails. So like it can be as simple as a quick walk around the neighborhood. So whenever you can, get outside. And the last one, I firmly believe that we always have a choice. And when you have a choice to make, I hope that you choose love over fear. Now, when we say everything's a choice, a lot of that sounds like floaty up here and woo-woo. And the reason that that feels that way is because there's no acknowledgement of the fact that we're not all born on the same foundation from which to make choices. Like the choices that I make every day are probably very different from the ones that you're faced with, but we always have a choice. And when we can choose love over fear. Some examples. When I was in the dressing room the first time and I didn't recognize the body I was in, I could have looked at myself and been like, wow, you're gross. but I didn't. Instead, I was curious and I chose love for myself over the fear of being fat that my mother had instilled in me from a very young age. That's where my body image issues came from. When I was young, my mom told me, "Hey, Sydney, you better watch what you eat or you're going to end up like me." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So for my whole life, I was scared of being fat because apparently that was the worst thing I could be. Didn't matter if I was a good person or not. Didn't matter if I got good grades. If I was fat, it was bad. So in that moment, in that dressing room, I chose love for myself and curiosity about how I got there than over the fear of being fat. When I got diagnosed with diabetes, I chose love for myself over the fear of the stigma of that disease. I didn't know what diabetes was about. I could have looked at that diagnosis as a death sentence and been like, well, it's too late now. I've got a chronic illness. I'm just going to be sick for the rest of my life. But I believed that I could heal myself and I wanted to see if it was possible. And in that moment, when I was diagnosed, I chose love for myself over the fear of the stigma of that disease. And every time I get to stand up, sit down, do it in person, do it online, do it on a trail, whatever, every time I get to share this story, I'm choosing love for myself over the fear of what happens when a woman stands up and speaks her truth. Because regardless of where you sit politically, socially, economically, conversations about trauma, in particular about sexual assault, are not open conversations that we have willing variety. We just don't. So in that moment, every time that I do this, I'm choosing love for myself over the fear of that, of what happens. Like we've seen how sexual assault stories play out in the media. We see how people just get dragged through the mud. And it's a scary thing. But the only reason that I even have the confidence and the ability to share the story that I'm sharing with you now is because other people were brave enough to do it and gave me the language so I could understand what happened to me and then turn my pain into power. So anytime that you can, choose love over fear. Thank you so much for being here tonight. If you guys have questions, I would love to answer them. And if you have any questions about the Trans-Catalina Trail or anything else, I would love to answer them for you. So let's see if we've got anything in the chat. Looks like we don't. So I will leave you with this. If you guys are interested in what we're doing as an organization, so Hiking My Feelings is a nonprofit organization. Last year we toured the United States and did 64 storytelling events around the US and hosted 69 hikes to encourage people to get off the couch and onto the trail. I wrote a book called Hiking My Feelings, Stepping into the Healing Power of Nature, and that's right here. So this book is the 292-page version of the story I just shared in all of its glory, and it's available on our website, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere where you can order a book, you can get my book. And at the end of 2019, we incorporated as a nonprofit organization. So now we were a week into our 2020 tour when COVID hit. The workshop that I was going to be hosting at Joshua Tree, the in-person version of this, was the first thing to get canceled. So it wiped out our entire event calendar. And our plan was to tour the country for another 2 to 3 years and just, raise money and get the word out and do what we need to do to make sure that people know that like Hiking My Feelings is the thing and we're out here helping people. So the someday plan was to open a retreat center because that's one of the questions that we heard a lot while we were on the road was, hey, like this work is great. I love this hike. And also, where can I come do this for longer periods of time? How do I get more exposure to this work? So we're like, oh, we'll open a retreat center someday. And then COVID happened and we know that we're not going to be able to tour the way that we had toured last year for the foreseeable future. So now the someday plan is the right now plan. So anything that you donate today to the Joshua Tree National Park Association is going to go towards their programming and supporting their cause and their mission. And if you're interested in getting involved with what we've got going on, we're going to be hosting a 20-day virtual Campfire event series. This was to replace the big fundraiser that we were supposed to be doing around Chicago, May 26th to June 14th. We were going to hike 220 miles in 20 days to raise money for a retreat center, the American Diabetes Association, and RAIN, which is the largest anti-sexual violence organization in the United States. And clearly we won't be doing that until we can all safely camp and hike together. So we've postponed that trip, but in its place, we're hosting a virtual Campfire series, which is 20 nights of me reading from my book, interviewing experts, and some live entertainment. So we've got musicians, live art, comedians, spoken word artists. We've got a cooking demo. We've got some different workshops on like how to initiate more play into your life and stuff like that. So it's just a big gathering to help hold space, build community, and bring some inspiration in these uncertain times. Because like everything's weird, and what I miss most is just like gathering around the campfire with some friends and just telling stories. So for 20 days, we're doing that, and that's going to be to raise money for the Hiking My Feelings Wilderness Wellness Center. So I'm going to see. I don't see any questions coming through here. So thank you so much for being here. If you have anything that you'd like to ask me and you can't do it here, then I'm going to put this up so you have contact information for us and for the Joshua Tree National Park Association. And so that is it. I wish I had the ability to answer your questions if you have any. Thank you for being here tonight. And Desert Live is a storytelling event that is new to the Joshua Tree National Park Association, and they will be bringing in more storytellers for different stories kind of like this. So I hope you guys are all well. I hope you're having a wonderful week so far. I hope that this was helpful and inspiring. And if you guys have any questions at all, you can find me. I'm at Hiking My Feelings on Instagram. You can find us at hikingmyfeelings.org. And if you're interested in signing up for the Campfire, we would love to see you. And if you click that little donate button in the top, all of that money goes straight to the Joshua Tree National Park Association. They are the ones hosting this event. And I would just like to say thank you to them, Kevin, Gabby, team. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you so much and have a nice, safe time when we can all